Hello, everyone.
What's up?
I am Mimir,
And I'm Lennex.
and today we're going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Let's go.
Few quick things before we jump into it, though. We have a new background, new overlay here. Testing it out, trying to see how well it works. Let us know if you prefer this one or the old one. This one's a little bit cleaner. And then, let's see. Got all this going.
Loving me some sweet ass particle effects, by the way. That looks great. Plus, you can see our logos finally, which is nice.
Yeah, we switched out the old logo and put these ones up there. I think we'll start using these ones a little bit more, especially if you guys like this one better. Let us know. Remember to check out the merch store if you haven't. For those of you watching on YouTube, make sure you head over to Twitch, and for those of you on Twitch, make sure you head over to YouTube. Make sure you just kind of mingle with everybody. Leave some comments. We like to hear from you.
It's weird that most of the comments I get about our podcast are from people we know IRL, and I'm just like I like that you guys watch my stuff, but I want to hear from my internet friends.
Yeah, any of you out there that are watching, like, if you're not friends with us in real life, like, you should definitely be commenting. We don't know you. We would like to hear from you. We can always hear from the people that we know in real life. We see them.
I want to tell all my friends IRL about my internet friends and how cool they are compared to them.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything else that we should say before we jump in?
Let's see. We plugged the merch. We got the new logos. I'm ready to start if you are.
Yeah, I think so.
Sweet.
Why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
All right. Gonna go ahead and start this off. Avatar: The Last Airbender. What a show. Holy crap. I love that show so much. I started watching when I was younger, and it was okay. Just came off as a better than average Nickelodeon cartoon.
Yeah.
I think over time, it's Avatar was one of those shows that really impressed me by doing something that was aging up with its audience. It started out as a kid show, and then it upped itself into a young adult show.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those shows that I think I remember coming home and sitting down and catching like a few episodes or whatever. A lot of them were the same episodes that I had seen before. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen the episode where they like
Great Divide.
destroy the big tank train drill.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, that was like one of the ones that I seen on TV all the time. It was like every day I came home from school and it was on.
Wow, you had a different problem than what I did, though. My problem was that because of scheduling issues, this is actually noted by a lot more fans, actually. I mean, the show itself was always on the verge of being canceled by Nickelodeon because, big studios never understand what they have. But one of the things that really messed the show up for a lot of fans was the show would be in a little bit of a limbo, or the release dates would be all screwed up, and so they just run the same episodes on repeat for a while. The drill episode, I think, was that would probably fit in just when they were hitting another scheduling hike. But I think the big one, the one that got me and also got me really mad at the show, was the fact that they always played the same 2 or 3 episodes. And it was the one where the Great Divide, where they have to cross like that big series of canyons. And then there's the other one with let's see, what is it? It was Great Divide, and the one where they're sick and Aang has to go get the kids medicine.
Oh yeah, I mean I love the Great Divide though. That one that's a great episode because it comes with the most famous song.
No, not the.
Well, not the most famous, but
you gotta say.
Okay, so Great Divide. Yeah, you're right. That's the other one. That's the one with the 2 warring tribes. So Secret Tunnel was the one that I was thinking of.
Secret Tunnel is an amazing song, top of the charts, #1 hit track. I want a single featuring Jay-Z on it. It's amazing. I loved those later episodes also, where they they started exploring more of the characters and stuff too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Down at Beck, yeah, it was super frustrating because they played those same episodes on loop. Like I remember just flipping on the TV uh, in between pretending to do my homework, and I would just be like, "Oh, cool, Avatar's coming on. Is it a new episode? It's the Great Divide again." Ah,
I think I only seen
like
the Great Divide a few times, to be honest with you. Like I mean, as much as I've watched the show, is probably like maybe add 5 times or whatever to that. Like 5 extra times I've seen that episode. I didn't see it that often when it came up. Like I said, it was usually like the one with the big drill, like when they were drilling through. What was it? Was it Ba Sing Se that they were drilling through?
yeah, the walls of Ba Sing Se.
Yeah.
That's a better episode to be caught on repeat. At least there's like real action going on in that one. I mean, at least the episode where Yang ran off to get the frogs for medicine or whatever. At least that episode had like the what is it? I think it's the Yu Yan archers was what they were called. Those guys who had like the war paint on their faces and they would do like all this crazy shit with like it's like, oh, we jumped off the cliff, time to shoot an arrow to save our lives, and it's just like, oh god, every one of these guys is freaking Hawkeye.
Um, let's see. I know I wanted to pull up some other stuff too, so just so I have some more reference stuff and everything. I got the fandom wiki open.
Oh, he's going to his notes.
No, I'm just just so that way I can if I need to reference something I can try and find it quickly or whatever. Um,
Uh, I mean, let me ask you then. Who do you think is your favorite character?
ooh, out of everybody in the show, um, I mean I like certain people for certain reasons. I guess I should say. I really liked Iroh. Obviously, I think he's like one of the big staple characters.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for a young man, like he's definitely one of those like someone to look up to.
Oh yeah,
Um,
and there's like that fatherly figure, like that older male authority figure, and I mean the reason that Zuko learned to rely on him is the same reason that we all learned to love him too. It's because Iroh's just a great lovable character.
yeah, and I did really like Zuko too. Like his whole story arc and everything. That's why I love him. But I think Sokka was another one too, where he's always been that goofball, but he definitely like matured in his own way. Like he's still fun loving and everything, but he learned to be more serious. I mean, even at the very beginning, you could tell that he was really trying to be like impressive and serious, but then he realized he didn't need to try so hard to do that. He just needed to rely on himself and his own instincts and the friends around him to be able to like be who he needed to be. So I think that was really cool.
Oh yeah,
Um,
honestly, for me, most days, and you're listing off like all the characters right now.
yeah, that's
Uh,
why I said I
I,
know there's certain ones for certain reasons.
no, me too. Exactly. It's a very well-rounded cast overall. Like just about everybody has something good about them. I mean, even Cabbage Guy is a great running gag.
Yeah.
Um, but I have to say that for me, most days it's a coin flip between Zuko and Sokka. But I think Zuko just barely wins it out most days. But I also love Sokka very much for the reasons you listed, and just the young man's struggle away from everything, and like his dad is gone, all the other men are gone, and he sort of has all this responsibility thrown on him. He's like looking after all the kids in the village who are clearly way too young to be of any actual use, and he's just trying to cope as best he can with looking after everyone.
Yeah. I will say, since you brought up Cabbage Man, I seen before they started talking about like all the like new casting and everything for the live action stuff that they wanted to do. I seen like a fan like casting years and years ago where somebody wanted Jackie Chan to play the Cabbage Man, and I thought that was so great, and I thought it would have been so funny.
Yeah, oh god, that would have been freaking perfect. Well, I mean, I guess that bridges us into the talking about the live action, but yeah, the God, yeah, we mentioned it earlier, but mentioning studios that don't understand what they have, uh, freaking M Night Shyamalan and whatever studio that was responsible for the movie. It's like God, talk about not understanding what makes your IP popular, and then completely butchering it when you try and bring it into a multi-million-dollar production screen.
Yeah, I'll be honest, never watched that movie.
You're not
But
missing much
I know
unless you're looking to hate yourself.
only because I seen that it was absolutely hated and everything, and I was like, nah, I don't really feel like ever getting into this. Maybe one day I'll watch it just because it is like iconic because it's so bad, but as of
It's not
like
even so
now and
bad it's
everything,
good.
yeah.
It's not even so bad that it's good. It's so bad that it's just bad, and it's the fact
Yeah.
that there's something so much better that we know about. Like the cartoon itself is just leagues and leagues better. Um, I absolutely hated the fact that like there was an interview that they did at one point. I think it was with M Night Shyamalan, but it was with him or one of the other producers who. Well, spoiler alert because you haven't seen it, I guess. But this is a minor thing. Um, so so the way it works in Avatar is that like firebenders they just shoot fire out of their fists, right?
Yeah.
And that gives them a huge advantage over the other nations because it's like, oh, there needs to be water nearby for me to do this, or oh, there needs to be earth for me nearby in order to bend it, or whatever. Airbenders and firebenders are lucky because it's like, oh, we can just do whatever wherever we are. Like we'll always be in an environment where there's air. We'll
Yeah.
always be in an environment where we could just shoot a fireball from our hands and make something out of it. And apparently, I'm just gonna blame M Night Shyamalan for that because he doesn't get blamed enough. But he's like, oh well, that just doesn't seem fair that firebenders can do that. So I nerfed it, so they have to bring like torches or braziers with them everywhere they go in order to bend fire. And I'm just like, that's so unfair. He's like, that's so unfair, and I'm like, that's the point, man.
Yeah,
Firebenders.
I did
Go ahead.
see some trailers, or I guess not trailers, little clips and everything, with I'm assuming it was probably like something going on with the firebenders or whatever. I don't remember exactly what I'd seen. It was a long time ago, but it was like the firebenders were pulling fire from like the braziers and everything. So
And it
I
was like
I do
it
know like
wasn't
what
at
you're
all
talking about.
exciting.
Yeah.
And it looks so ineffectual when seen on screen too. Like at one point, I think I remember seeing Zuko like try and terrify like the Southern Water Tribe villagers, and it's just such a pitiful expression of it that I'm just like, he basically did the equivalent of firing a Roman candle off above their heads for all the spectacular effect it was. Like in the cartoon, it's like there's this big just like spin kick waft of fire that goes over everyone's heads, and that probably feels really oppressive right underneath it, or just being near it at all. But meanwhile, in the movie, it's just like, if he'd taken out a firework and just shot it at the crowd, it would have had the similar intimidating effect. And I'm just like, really, guys? Like, no one thought this was terrible. Like, no one in the special effects department could have cleaned this shit up. Like, really, guys?
So, what is your favorite bending type?
Oh God, that's so hard.
Or if you could be a bender, what would you want to be?
Again, super hard question. This is like, it's even harder than picking your favorite Hogwarts house. I would say waterbender is what appeals to me the most, but I'd say that earthbender probably more suits my type.
So, mine would definitely be earthbending. I think like earthbending would be. I don't want to say like the most practical, but I think for me that's the coolest. I know everybody loves like firebending and everything. Like, I mean, it's the same thing with like Pokemon. Everyone loves to pick like the fire starter and everything.
Oh
So
yeah, because your first fire starter ever was a big dragon, and I know
yeah,
he's not a dragon type, but whatever.
yes, but I don't know. For me, I never really was like super into the whole idea of like uh firebending or like fire starters or anything like that. Like, I think they're kind of cool, but I think they're also like one of those things where it's like, okay, iPhone or Android, everyone's like, oh, the iPhone's the best, and I'm just like, yeah, not really. I don't really care. I guess I'm a little bit more hipster that way, where I'm like, oh, I don't like what's cool, but I don't mean to do that. It just doesn't appeal to me, you know.
It
But
just it just sounds like that sometimes.
yeah, everyone has that like that hype over very specific stuff like that, and I'm just like, I mean, it's not that cool. I mean, it's cool, but it's not that cool.
I mean, you could break away from the mainstream and still, like your thing. I mean, it wasn't popular for the longest time to be a Hufflepuff, but I still told people like, yeah, no, Hufflepuff, they're like the chillest house. That's why I love them. And I mean, everyone wanted to pick firebending. I think a lot in part of it was because everyone just loved Zuko. Zuko was a great character and had all these cool moments and great screen time,
Well, I
story
think
arcs and stuff.
more so it was kids liked the whole idea of like they wanted to be tough and they were like, oh, this is so cool, I can be badass, I can shoot fire out of my hands because that's so cool. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess, but you know what's even cooler is like shifting the terrain around you, or like later on you find out with like the cooler stuff with water bending and everything. Like you can
Hmm.
pull the moisture out of the air if you're like really good, or you can blood bend, or you know all this crazy shit with water bending. Air bending, I mean, that was pretty cool too, because it's literally like you said, the air is all around you and there was so much cool shit you could do. You could pretty much fly. I mean, you could fly with firebending and stuff too, but that's a little bit different.
Well, actually, so did you ever finish Korra?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember? Yeah, you remember Zahir, right?
I'm not super good with the names in Korra. I didn't
He
watch it as
was
much.
he was the Red Lotus guy who like shaved his head and was always like, "Oh, let me tell you about the Guru. Oh, it's like I'm a better Airbender than any of you."
Mm,
How do
I
you not remember this guy? He's like the coolest. He's one of the coolest villains the show has ever produced.
I'm trying to remember. I only watched Korra once all the way through.
Oh my god, I had no idea I was starting this conversation with it. I called you this at the beginning, but yeah, you are a casual. Oh god,
I
never
was
never saw the movie just to hate on it. Never saw Korra.
I seen Korra. I seen it once all the way through, and it was literally 2 years ago, 3 years ago that I finally watched it all the way through. I
All right,
never was like meh, or
that's
yeah.
that's recent, but I'm not going to keep busting your balls over it. But all right, so let me dial it back for you. All right, so season 3. Remember how like all the different airbenders just popped out of nowhere?
Yes.
All these people just randomly got the ability, and then we saw this dude who was up in a mountaintop who was like, "Hey, I also like he was being imprisoned by the White Lotus, and then he tricked the guards because he suddenly got airbending too." And so
Yeah.
then he leaves and he like rescues his buddies from jail, and they're all like super powerful benders in their own way. Like one of them's a lava bender, one of them's a water bender with no arms. The fire bender is that chick with the exploding eye on her head.
hmm I'm looking right now
And
at Zahir. So
yeah, Zaheer, I
yep,
think.
I got it.
Yeah, awesome character, and he sort of at one point reaches this thing where he's following the teachings of this guru that he admires so much, and the thing about that guru is that he's like, yeah, this person removed all their earthly attachments and figured out how to literally fly using their airbending power, and that gives him a huge power boost late in the game, where after we see the girl that he likes, Pali or something like that, the firebending chick,
Yeah.
when she dies, he right there like is like, okay, she's gone. Time like that was my last attachment. I should be able to do it now. And then literally he's able to just step off the cliff and fly. And he's
Yeah.
like, oh well, you guys suck. I'm off to do my evil plans. Bye. And then flies away.
Yeah, I'm reading it right here. It's saying becoming devoid of all earthly tethers after Peely's death. Zahir became the second airbender in history to unlock the ability of flight.
Yeah, which is
So
a
yeah.
cool ability, but also really messed up in how it's achieved because basically I mean, it says it there. He's devoid of all earthly attachments, which means he doesn't really live in the world anymore, which is a little bit sad. You know, but in any case, yeah. So, I mean, the flight thing is cool. The thing about airbenders, though, that I like, it never appealed too much to me was that it's like we got to see airbending achieve incredible things. I mean, Aang spent the entire first series, like all 3 seasons, showing off with airbending as his primary element. He spent it showing us how powerful the airbender could be, even though it was non-violent, which is cool. It's like he takes a very pacifistic, non-violent approach to everything, and we see how powerful that can still make him. Because just because you choose non-violence doesn't mean you're not capable of bringing the smoke.
Well, yeah, that's like who was Aang's mentor? Um,
The guy, the old dude. Shit, I can't remember his name. The old guy who, as a kid, we saw him in flashbacks.
yeah, he's the one that they found in the temple. Um, well, I was gonna say that he Gyatso.
Gyatso, that's right. Yeah, Gyatso. I think he was named after one of the Dalai Lamas.
Yeah, he suffocated a room full of like firebenders.
Yeah, that's the that's the implication of that because they find Monk Gyatso in a room full of dead Fire Nation soldiers, and everyone's just like, "Oh, they didn't talk about it, but Gyatso probably was a freaking beast when he died and killed a room full of firebenders."
Like he literally took all the air out of the room, suffocated himself and the firebenders, and was
Yeah,
just
that's
like,
a
well,
yeah.
if this is the way I'm gonna go, this is what we're doing.
We didn't actually see it happen, but that is the implication there, and that is really cool. Yeah, they didn't talk about that with any of the other Airbenders either, which kind of sucks. But it's the Airbender are wiped out, and that's basically like where we put that.
No, yeah,
The only Airbender we're supposed to care about in the series is Aang, so it's like minimal time for Gyatso because he's related to Aang, or at the very least because he's related to Aang through a familial connection, like he's his mentor, his guide, whatever. But yeah,
yeah, but like in Korra, there's the other airbenders. The one chick, I can't remember her name, she gets suffocated um, with the vortex around her head. Wasn't that Zahir that did that too or something?
yep,
Um,
Zahir did that one. He did. Yeah, that was when everybody freaked out because it was like, oh, we had no idea airbending could be used for this. He literally sucked the air out of her lungs, and we all watched her suffocate on screen.
yeah, there's so many like subtypes to the bending. I've seen a chart before where they kind of like talk about the mixture of it all. Let me see if I can find that real quick. But yeah, it was like all the sub elements. So like water had like the spirit bending and the healing and the blood. Um, Earth had like the lava bending, the sand bending, the metal bending. Fire had lightning, combustion, and redirection. And air had flight, temperature regulation, and spirit projection. Like,
Right. Yeah. People were talking about that too. Like the reason Aang wasn't freezing his ass off when he was in the South Pole or the North Pole, because he was only ever wearing his air nomad clothes, right? Like the light airy clothes.
yeah,
Uh, so the idea was that I mean, they don't talk about these things in cartoons, but people are. I think there's like a Reddit post or whatever that was passed around the internet for a while. That was something along the lines of, "Oh, thank God, temperature regulation makes so much more sense. I thought he was just able to keep warm thanks to the power of his boundless optimism."
well, I mean, because if you take a look at how Iroh teaches Zuko, he talks about like combining teachings from the other elements into his firebending. So you see, like when Zuko gets put into the freezer in the prison, he regulates his temperature using airbending techniques to keep himself from losing his ability to uh, firebend when he's that cold.
Oh, right.
Obviously, he wouldn't like lose it, but like he still had the ability to firebend when he was that cold because he used airbending techniques to regulate his temperature. And then he talks about like the water bending on being able to flow to be able to like redirect lightning and everything. Like you have to kind of like be more fluid with your movements and go with the flow. And then you can see some of the like earthbending techniques he has too when he's teaching them, like staying strong and firm, standing your ground, and being forceful and direct with your attacks and everything. So he taught kind of the way like Aang should have been taught. Like I think Iroh would have made like the perfect teacher for Aang, or at least like somebody who definitely should have like given him years of being able to like kind of study or mentor under him and everything, or not mentor under him, but like have him as a mentor.
Oh yeah,
because
in a more
yeah,
perfect world, yeah, no, I agree with you. In a more perfect world, Iroh would have been a fantastic teacher for Aang, just because he would have been able to impart so much.
yeah. Iroh was one of my like I said in the beginning, one of my absolute favorites, especially because of how he understood the world, how he knew that there was a balance and how everything was pretty much connected, and to not look at it as this is how firebending is, this is how airbending is. It was like we all are connected. There's all this energy and fluid, like understanding running through us.
The nations are separate but not, it's all interconnected. There's really a link between all of us, and only thinking that the world is just one thing is incorrect. And I mean, there's even that scene, yeah, where he's drawing that diagram out for Zuko, and he's showing him, he's like, yeah, these are the nations, and they're all connected in these ways. And then Zuko's like, it sounds like Avatar stuff, and he's like, the Avatar is the representation, but the idea has been around a lot longer and a lot stronger than the Avatar.
Yeah, I mean, because the Avatar is supposed to be like the connection between everyone and the spirit world. So it wasn't, the Avatar is, from a specific nation and they just happen to be a peace bringer and be able to unite all the nations and be the bridge to the spirit world. No, it's supposed to be like all people are connected, and the Avatar is a link between all people and the spirit world. Not
Right.
supposed to be like, oh well, Aang's an airbender, so he represents the airbenders more than he does the other nations, and happens to be like a link between people and the spirit world. No, it's not what it is. It's supposed to be like a whole, like people as a whole.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though. He's an embodiment of like larger concepts and connections and links and bonds and all that, and it all gets very metaphysical when you start delving deeper into it. But yeah, Iroh being able to take lessons from each of these things and make himself stronger, like the lightning bending thing you were leading on to earlier, where the technique is very much like what waterbenders use, and it's like, yeah, you take bits of knowledge from other sources and you do the Bruce Lee thing where it's like, I took all the knowledge, I brought it together, and I distilled it down into something that's better than any one thing. And it's very cool how he does it, and it's very interesting because there's these moments also like where Zuko is getting lightning bent at him by his father, and he does the redirect lightning move, and uh, just there's this moment of what the shit am I looking at that crosses Ozai's face, and it's this moment where it's like, oh, because it honestly never occurred to him that you could redirect lightning like that. Like, I'm sure even Azula was shocked the first time she ever saw that shit, because as far as we know, Iroh's the only one that ever did it, because he's the only one that ever studied like this, who is both an advanced firebender and would have had access to that kind of knowledge, or would have been interested in that kind of knowledge, because most of the advanced firebenders are like high-ranking Fire Nation dudes, and they're not exactly going out on cultural exchanges.
Yeah, I mean, Iroh was definitely like one of the best. Was he a commander? I think, or
He was
General Iroh. Yeah.
yep, he was a general at first, and they call him the Dragon of the West.
Yeah. So I mean, he was a well known soldier. Like or a well known warrior. I guess I should say. And then kind of like during all that and after everything that he went through, he kind of started understanding a little bit better how things are connected and how the cultures really aren't like that different. I mean, he did his duty to the Fire Nation because that's where he was from and that's what he knew, and then kind of like started realizing like, well, the world's bigger than just us and maybe we're not in the right here, like I should start looking at more than just ourselves.
Yeah, it's a very useful, very wise way to look at things. Where it's like, you never take things from just one source of wisdom. Like, like a lot of people like, and also like even like in like philosophy or classes or if you're ever engaging in like coursework that's like trying to teach you like higher concepts like philosophy or about like business ethics or stuff like that too. One of the things they'll do is they'll always be like, hey, and branch out while you're at it to look at what some other different cultures think about this thing. Like a lot of places, like for example, the Book of Five Rings or the Art of War is very popular in the U.S. and it showcases a very different method of thinking in a lot of ways. Um, it's used for a lot of different tactics and like formulating strategies and stuff over in Eastern cultures. But in the West, it's also thought of as like, hey, this is another source of wisdom. It could help you if only to understand how these other people see the world. Like to broaden your horizons, give you a more advanced idea of how things are.
Yeah.
Just gonna also mention that the dynamic of the relationship between Iroh and Zuko has got to be one of my all-time. I think I might have mentioned this earlier. It's got to be one of my all-time favorite relationships in any show, just because it works so well, and it doesn't feel like I'm ever being talked down to, or it doesn't ever feel like the audience is being talked down to, or that it's the relationship is being simplified for the audience to understand. It's like, no, this comes across as very real.
Yeah, I mean they really made a lot of these characters have some like general depth to them, and then we start getting into more of their own personal story and everything. It wasn't just like these characters were thrown together. Like the actual characters, the main characters of the entire show, like they have quite a bit of depth, and then they even have some characters that don't have like that big of a role in the show. They actually have a lot of deep lore with themselves too. Like what's her name? The acrobat.
Ty Lee.
Ty Lee, yeah. I was like, it's something Lee. She, like her whole story and everything is a pretty good story, and there's actually a fan theory too about her being like a secret airbender.
Yeah, like she's like a descendant from one of the air tribes or one of the air nomads that like escaped the purge and then mixed in with the general population of another nation. And Ty Lee's one of that person's descendants, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because if you look at like her facial features and the way she's like drawn and portrayed and everything, and their story of like being in the circus and traveling and everything, like it just kind of makes sense. And the way that she moves and fights, like it's very, very flowy and very airbender-ish,
very different from the martial arts styles that we see other Fire Nation people practice. Yeah. And it stands out. And like you said, that's why there's a lot of credence to that theory. And I think at some point someone also was like, they took a side-by-side image and they're like, here, if I take off Ty Lee's hair and just give her a bald head, this is how she looks. Now I draw on an airbender tattoo. Don't tell me she's not Aang's twin. Like her face is the exact same.
Yeah. A lot of people they've made that comparison, and I like that little fan theory, because it adds more depth to the show and everything. And I'd never read like any of the I don't know what you'd call them, comics or whatever, or if they're like a manga. I don't think they'd be called a manga though, but
they're referred to as books, but they're comics.
Yeah. So I've never read any of those, but I know that they go into like quite a bit of story alongside like what we already have. And there are like some deeper aspects to the books too. So one day I might read them.
Some of them are good, some of them aren't. I haven't read them all, but I've read the one that happens right after the. It's been a while, but it's the one that happens right after the end of the story, where like the war is over and everyone's all like, "Oh God, we're doing our victory parade now! Yay, the war is over! Everything's great!" And right away, Zuko's like, "All right, time to fix the Fire Nation." And the conflict with that one is giving up the Fire Nation colonies. Which at first he's like, yeah, no, Earth Kingdom, take back your colonies or whatever. And then the people in those colonies are like, what the hell are you doing? These colonies have, like, for the last 100 years, we've been Fire Nation citizens. Like, their parent there's one girl he's talking to who it was like, yeah, my dad's a firebender and my mother's an Earth Nation citizen or whatever, and it's like this is ridiculous. You can't just make me an Earth Kingdom citizen. Like they won't accept me. My Fire Nation doesn't even accept me. But now you're basically asking us to surrender our territory to a foreign power, and that's unacceptable. Like you don't understand who we are, what we're about. And Zuko's, I mean, he's got the presence of mind to be like, oh, I didn't think of that. You're kind of right. You don't really fit in with them. You don't fit in as much with us, but you still somewhat fit in. And I think someone even mentioned at one point, I'm not sure if this is the problem when you get too deep into fandom, but I'm pretty sure at some point they gave some sort of offhanded comment about how there was like a battalion of Earthbenders who were all Fire Nation citizens. Like they were Earthbenders that were born in Fire Nation territory, and so they were raised on Fire Nation ideals, but are like, hey, I'm an Earthbender though. Let me put these skills to use for my country, and so that's what they did instead. But they all got like consolidated into one battalion or something, which is a cool idea. And I hope I'm not just pulling that out of my ass, but I distinctly remember someone discussing it like it was a real thing. So at the very least, it's plausible because that'd be a real thing you'd have to deal with. I mean, a century down the line of everyone of the populations intermingling, it's like you're going to get a lot of marriages between cultures, and you're going to get a lot of earthbending kids born into the Fire Nation. You probably get a fair number of firebending kids born to Earth Nation territory, but you know, it just it's this cool idea. And then the whole comic, just to sum it up, is basically them dealing with the struggle of, well, how do we fix this? Like, how do we explain it? And Aang's all about, restoring harmony, and Zuko's then like, well, what does that even mean, restoring harmony? And Aang's still like 14, and so he's like, something.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to end up reading a lot of them because, I mean, it's I don't know how many there actually are, but I'm gonna end up having to read them because they do go into like more stuff than the shows do, and with the new show coming out plus the live action stuff, like, did you hear that they're supposed to be doing a show now for like the teen years, or for some reason there was an advertisement that was playing on one of the websites, like on the fan base thing, and it just started playing a bunch of sound. It kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, where's that sound coming from?
It's like, oh god, what did you do now?
So that's gonna be in the recording. Sorry, unless maybe I can cut that. I don't know.
Love it, folks. Yeah, there's a lot of like also fan produced works out there, and there's a lot of like communities that dive into. Like, I did a little bit of research myself before when I heard that we were doing this, being like, let me reintroduce myself to the topic. I started going over it. I think there's a Kyoshi book, called like Rise of Kyoshi or something like that out there. And it's all about like Avatar Kyoshi's journey, because the fandom really loves her because they just love the idea of an Avatar that's like Kyoshi. People joke about it. I mean, there's a little bit of evidence to back it up, but it's the fact that she's so aggressive and she's like the Earth Kingdom Avatar. People are just like, oh god, I bet she was like this hard ass and she just like kicked ass everywhere she went. It didn't help that the writers also made her like 6.5 feet tall.
Well, I mean, she is supposed to be like super tall, very big woman who was like a mountain of a woman, and she didn't take shit. Like she talked about yeah, she talked about, like the best and easiest way to stop a war or to end a war or whatever is to do just that, like squash that flame, like stop it.
Oh yeah.
Like not try and be peaceful as like the air nomads were. It wasn't about trying to find peace and balance. It was like, no, this is wrong, and it's wrong, and I'm gonna knock it the fuck off now.
There's just enough room for interpretation in the lore as it is that, at least as far as I'm aware, that you can put a lot of cool stuff in there with different avatars. Like, Kyoshi is seen as like, being the hard ass, because I think at the time that she was alive, the way that it's been portrayed is sort of like a Warring States era, or like, Chinese feudal lords, where it's like, warlords would raise armies, march them across the country. They die. A couple more warlords would pop up, do the same thing. It's a returning series of like cycles of just armies being raised, marching across kingdoms, and declaring themselves lords of some plot of land or another. And it was Kyoshi standing up that finally like solidified it and put an end to it. Like she instituted reforms by creating organizations like the Daili, who were just like, hey, we're not doing the warlord shit anymore. We're all Earth Kingdom, so that's just how it's going to be from now on.
Yeah, there was that pretty famous tale in the last Airbender that was about how she like basically killed the one warlord or the general, whoever the fuck he was.
Chin or something like Chin the Conqueror, I think is what his name
Yeah,
was.
he was trying to cause all this disruption, and she was just like, nope, like that's not happening, and she just like squashed that shit. But like I was saying before like the whole advertisement thing popped up. There's supposed to be, or at least what I've heard is there's supposed to be a show where it's going to be them as teenagers or like young adults or whatever, and then I heard that there was going to be another show with an Earthbender avatar, and then we have the live action that I've heard of. So I think it'll be pretty cool to kind of like bring the show back and explore the gang again, but also I think it'd be pretty cool to have like another new perspective because like I said, I watched Korra once. I don't think I really gave it too much of a try in the very beginning. I think I watched like one or two episodes, and I didn't like Korra as a character as much. Like it just felt like it was trying too hard to push that she basically knew everything except for airbending. Like that was the one thing she couldn't get. Like the rest of it
Right.
just came so natural to her, and I don't think I really connected too much with her in those first couple episodes. So that's why I was like, man, I don't really know if I want to watch this, and I didn't give it a fair shot until like later on, way later on. And I did like the show; it was a good show, and I do like Korra as a character. But I think just at the beginning, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I can really watch this. Like it just doesn't seem all that interesting. I don't see much growth happening for this character. It just seemed like there would be a little bit of growth, and then that was it. Of course, I didn't know like everything that was going to end up playing out and everything, but I was like, well, where are they going to take it from here if she's already good with everything except for airbending? But then there's a whole host of other problems and everything in the show, and it turned out better than I thought. So
Yeah, there.
like going into having like another like new avatar and everything, I'm interested to see how that would play out. Like if it's going to be the same type of thing or if it's going to be another journey where we see, them actually having to learn and go through like all the training and everything. Because with Korra, it was, jump cut to her being a young adult or, teenager or whatever. And then she's already great with all this other shit. So,
Yeah, the thing. So yeah, it's understandable. Like Korra didn't connect with everyone, and I mean a part of that was the same thing that made her appealing to some people is what turned her off for other people was the fact that she was literally Aang's opposite. She was great at all the bending, but she had like no spiritual awareness or like overt wisdom or like great cultural legacy that she was now the representative of that she carried with her. Um,
well, I mean,
Aang, like when we
even Aang still struggled with the spiritual stuff too for a long time.
Well, yeah, but he caught on to that much quicker than I mean, the guy basically followed the whole path of enlightenment. Like, I mean, part of this is like brevity of the episode, but he basically traveled the path of full enlightenment in a day, and it was only at the last step that he was like, "Nah, I changed my mind. At the last second, I'm leaving."
Well, I think that probably technically played out longer than it showed.
Probably a couple of days, but like
Yeah,
it's still the work of a lifetime condensed down into one episode.
yeah, but
Like
that's because that was kind of like how him being the Avatar, he already has like a powerful connection, even if he can't access it. he has a powerful connection, so I feel like that would come more naturally to an avatar. I mean, for Korra, her problem was being like basically too stubborn to be able to access it. And I think because Aang's teachings with being able to like kind of let go a little bit easier, even if, obviously couldn't let go at the very end type of thing, but just having those teachings of being able to kind of let go, focus, and figure this out, take a breath, meditate, that made it easier for him, so he could probably go through that stuff a lot quicker, because wasn't the guru like a couple hundred years old or 100 something years old or whatever? Like he was an old guy
He
who
was, yeah,
had
over a
gone,
century old, because
yeah, he had gone through all of that, throughout his life. So for him, it definitely was something that probably took a very long time, but because Aang's the Avatar, it was a lot easier for him, even though like he couldn't, finish it all perfectly. And
no,
Korra, she was just stubborn and wasn't able to like let herself go.
I see where you're coming from with it, and I mean, there's different theories that get passed around about it, about how, like, because air is the element of freedom, but she spent her whole life locked up in the South Pole. Like, how could she ever embrace the element of freedom when she herself doesn't know freedom? Um, there's also like the idea that because like she just naturally was like a headstrong individual, and then like she embraced the more aggressive elements. But I mean, just like how people are sometimes different in this way. Like, Aang was much more passive, and that's why earthbending was much harder for him. uh, Korra was much more aggressive, and that's why airbending is much harder for her. Also Aang had his own troubles with firebending too. It's like, the elements that are contrary to someone's personality are what give them the most trouble. And
Yeah.
Korra, like you said, she's stubborn, she's impatient, she spends a lot of her life locked up in the South Pole. So, it comes down to, it's like, well, how do you expect her to have this great spiritual connection? She was never trained for any of it. Whereas like the air nomads are just naturally a very spiritual people. Aang already knew about like spirits and stuff like that. And like, I think the first time when it was like that forest spirit that was going out of control, Aang was the one who was like, "Oh yeah, no, we got to find a way to settle the forest spirit, and we got to put it at peace. Otherwise, it's just going to rampage and hurt the people." And he
Yeah.
right away tried to communicate with it when everyone was just terrified. And that speaks a lot as to his view on things, where he's like, "Oh, we can come to an understanding here. Like, I understand that spirits are, they operate in a certain way, but they're not unknowable. We just have to put some work into it."
Yeah. They definitely like went into a lot of um how Aang is more peaceful because of the air nomads and everything, and how he really does view, like, if you look at all the episodes and how he approaches all these different situations, even with trying to like end the war and everything. He didn't want a war. He didn't want to kill the Fire Lord or anything. Like he literally was like anything else but this, Um, and everyone was telling him like there's no other choice. There's no other choice. And he was like there has to be. And with Korra, she kind of ran headfirst into everything without thinking about, how do I do this in a different way. It was like she was told, you know, this is what needs to happen, and she was like, right, got it, and I'm gonna do it, as directly as possible. And but what I don't really get is she had like some really great people around her who lived through some of that, who I feel like would have, tried to mentor her a little bit more as she was growing up, so it never got to the point where it was like, okay, well, she can't learn airbending because she's just way too stubborn, so now we have to go to the extreme to teach her. Instead of like letting it get to that point, you think it would have been something they tried a little bit better to like help redirect her as she was growing up. But
Yeah, there. I mean, yeah, there is some question as to like the competency of the train. Like, how did no one realize earlier on that Korra not knowing how to bend all the elements was a problem, or having trouble with one specific element means that they should at the very least try and make some sort of breakthrough early on, and rather than just wait it out. But I don't know. It just it I mean, they talk about in the old days how to learn an element, the avatar used to have to travel to the different nations and then learn from a master, and it's not until the avatar was already well into adulthood that they were a full master. um, I guess with the advent of like new technologies and stuff like that, and not to mention the world intermingling a little bit more, they managed to consolidate more masters in one place to train Korra. But there's only so many air masters, and before her it was the guy who had to die for her to be born. Korra isn't born until Aang dies. Like the avatar spirit can't leave the body of the previous avatar until they're dead, and then goes into the body of an infant that's just being born.
yeah, but
So
I mean, you have like Katara, who was around, who definitely.
Katara would she'd already be well into her years at that point. Also, like
Yeah, but
Katara
she,
is like,
as Korra is like a child, she could have, sat her down and said, "Hey, like, I fully understand, you know, kind of how you view things. These were some of the problems that Aang had faced, and this is how we overcame it, like as a team together, like all of us and his friends. These are some of the things that he had been through, like, maybe you should study this way, or maybe you should, you know, take this more serious or whatever. I don't know. I feel like at least she could have been like a slightly better mentor, but it seemed like she wasn't really around for Korra as much
I
as she
mean,
probably should have been.
yeah, I mean, she knew her and everything, and she could probably tell her about stuff. I mean, on the one hand, it's also like Korra's not an avatar. Like she's a waterbender, and she's also well into her grandma years at that point in life, because Aang would have been as well, and she's really getting on up there. Like when we see her, she is her own grand by that point. Uh, but it also might be a little bit unfair for her to be expected to do that. I mean, someone did point out, being like, "Yeah, isn't it a bit much to expect Korra, or sorry, not expect Korra, expect Katara, excuse me, to expect Katara to interact with the reincarnated soul of her dead husband?"
I mean,
Like, I mean, that's a bit of an emotional burden to put on someone.
yeah, okay. Well, like we see in the show, when Korra is pretty much at the age where she starts to go off on her own, um, so what, like, I don't know how old she would have been at that point, like, somewhere in her teens or later teens.
She's like 17 years old, I think, by the time we see her
Yeah,
in the
so
first
so
few episodes.
yeah, so she's talking to Katara around that time. Like, why couldn't Katara been like, okay, you're 10 years old now. That's given me 10 years to be able to grieve and work up the courage to realize that it's important for you to understand how to take over this role. Like, I should be there and help guide you from age 10 to what, 17.
I see your point, and in that respect, also, it's kind of like it becomes like whataboutism, like like, or why didn't this person do the thing perfectly? Um, but I do see your point. Katara probably could have, or I don't know, maybe she tried, and then but Korra just wasn't the most receptive student to that kind of thing. I mean, to be fair, when we saw her in the first season, she had to go through some pretty serious emotional events in order to overcome those blocks. I mean, it wasn't until she literally had all her other bending taken from her that she finally was able to airbend. Like that, like that's a pretty hefty emotional toll or mental toll to take on someone. So I don't know. I guess the question becomes like, some I don't know. Some answers don't mean anything unless the person in question comes to the conclusion on their own. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I, I guess what I'm saying is, as as if this was real, having somebody who knows and understands like the importance of this being like some sort of mentor, not saying that she needs to tell her how to behave or how to handle things or whatever, but at least being a mentor, being like, hey, I see that you are acting this like how Iroh was for Zuko, where he was like he could see the path he was going down, and he didn't force his hand in any one direction. He let him make his own decisions, but he gave him advice and he told him what he thought was right and wrong. And he told him to look inside himself to find the answers. But it feels like with Korra, they all they were focused on was train and learn, and it wasn't there was no mentoring going on for her, is what it seemed like. It
Yeah,
was all like, you need to learn this, and this is how it's gonna be done, and okay, you behave this way, fine, we get you're stubborn, we're gonna try and break that. We can't break it. And instead of breaking it, help teach her how to use that stubbornness to achieve what needs to be done.
yeah, no, I see what you're getting at too. I mean, she was. I mean, the guys who taught her were all like the White Lotus guys who are like reputable masters, members of to be members of their society, or at the very least very useful members or whatever. The way the organization is portrayed, um, presumably they just brought in like bending masters who like had no other real connection to Korra, and that they would then teach her, and then they would presumably either be a guard or they would just leave. Uh, so it stands to think that like they. I mean, she even talks about it how she has several firebending teachers. So it stands to mention that they're fairly distant from her. They're much more obsessed with like teaching forms and stuff too. They also talk about how like when she first sees pro bending, Bolin, who has no formal instruction whatsoever, still teaches her stuff about earthbending because the knowledge that he passes on, he's like, yeah, your style is really formal. This is though is how people do it on this level. This is why we do it around here. Like it's not all about strict adherence to the books or whatever else. It's no, it's like we do what works, and this is what's worked. We've adapted the styles that already exist, and that knowledge was new to her. Like things like changing the positions of her elbows and stuff to use projectiles more effectively when she's earthbending, changing her footwork to do waterbending more effectively and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Just maybe I'm extrapolating too much from this,
Well,
but
her
the
teaching was very textbook. I get what you mean, by that.
yeah, and so it's like it didn't go into like more nitty grittiness, or like there was no time for her to develop her own like take on certain styles. Like she probably never really got too into like the spiritual aspects of the styles or whatever. It seems like a lot of her education was just focused on okay, this is information about the world, learn it. This is information about firebending, learn it. This is a new technique, learn it. But even then, she wasn't taught about metal bending, which was a much more prevalent thing when she was growing up. But they never like sent away for a metal bending instructor to teach her. It's not until like book three of Korra, or season three of Korra, that she meets someone who's like, hey, you want to learn how to metal bend? And she's like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And it's like, well, I mean, you're the Avatar, you should be able to. And then she does, and it's like, congratulations, you're now the first Avatar who's ever metal bended. And it's just, oh, that's wow, that's the start of something pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Toph kind of disappeared and did like her own thing, and I could see why she wasn't like a huge influence on like Korra's life and everything. Um, but what's his name? Um, Aang's son. What was his name?
Tenzin, or
Yes,
J.K. Simmons.
yes, yep. Um, so I mean, Tenzin was kind of thrown a lot, and he was like stressed and everything and didn't really know what to do, wasn't really a good teacher or anything like that. So I understand why he wasn't really around. Like it was a lot for him to deal with. But even Katara was like, hey Tenzin, like I know that this is difficult for you. It's been difficult for me, but this is somewhat important type of thing. That's kind of like the gist that I got out of their relationship and everything. Like Katara, I wouldn't say was over it, but like she handled the situation a lot better throughout the years than Tenzin did. So
Yeah,
having like
family.
a bad you know teacher for like airbending and everything, or not having any teacher really for airbending, like I understand why airbending was more difficult for her too. So
Yeah, family dynamics are complicated. Aang's family, people used to shit on Korra for another reason too, and it was that it revealed the concept that Aang might have been a deadbeat dad who only showered love on one of his kids and just left the other two. Um,
yeah, I
which
mean,
that is an implication, but I don't know. Like thinking about it, and also like looking at all the facts or whatever. Like it seems more reasonable to the fact that it's like, I mean, he only had the one kid who was an airbender, and Aang was also big on his responsibilities as being like the last true airbender. Like I mentioned earlier, he's like the heir to this massive cultural legacy, and it's the comics go into a little bit too, where there's these guys like the air acolytes who are just various peoples who are just like, you know what, this lifestyle really appeals to me, or maybe I'm the descendant of one of these air nomad tribes, and so I'd very much like to learn about this or devote myself to this way of life. That's actually how Tenzin met his wife, or what's her name, Pema, I think her name was. Uh, and it was a pretty cool idea. Also, it's like these people who aren't airbenders themselves but are happy to devote themselves to this lifestyle, because a lot of it is lifestyle. Also, like Aang had this whole lifestyle approach that was a part of his character, and he wanted to be able to pass that on to somebody who could truly carry it, not just someone who mined it. And so when he had the one airbending son, it was like, well, yeah, he's going to probably go and do more with with that kid than the other ones. But I think at I don't know. Like there's more that goes into it, but there's like some implications where people who have delved like further into it and like cited specific stuff are also like, well, it sounds like Aang tried to bring his kids into it, but they weren't too interested, and so they felt left out when the third kid was really into it, and so Aang really had that bond with him, and then the other two kids felt left out because they didn't connect with him on that level.
yeah, it's like a father who loves baseball and he tries to force his kid to play sports, and the other two kids are like, nah, I don't really know, like if I like this, I'm not super interested. I'll do it because you want me to. And then the one kid's like, I'm gonna be in the MLB, so like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's an extra form of connection between parent and child that maybe it doesn't fully get across. And I mean, it's sad that the kids might have felt like they were being left out. And there's this genuinely like this there's this one moment that I thought was really sad. And I don't know if you remember because you said you only watched Korra once, but what's his name? Boomy. Yeah, Boomy, Aang's first son, who I love the fact that he named him after his friend.
yeah,
He's this really successful figure. He's like a general in the army or whatever. He's like gone on all these adventures, and he tells all these stories that people are like, oh, that sounds like bullshit, but the story in the second season is like, actually, Boomy tells a ridiculous story. He's probably telling the truth, just people don't believe him.
yeah,
um but there was this heartbreaking scene where it's like he's this accomplished guy. He's a grown man who's done all these wonderful things for the he's helped keep the world safe, and he's standing in front of a statue of his dad, and he's just saying, it's like, look, I know I wasn't the son you wanted me to be, but I hope I did okay at least, dad. And then he's just like, that's just heartbreaking to me, where it's just like he doesn't know if his dad would be proud of him or not for all that he's done. And I'm just like, oh, Boomy, come on, man.
yeah. And
Like,
I mean, like looking back at the like uh at least what we know from the last Airbender, looking back at the attitudes and the personalities of those characters, I really feel like no matter what, as long as like his kids weren't trying to destroy the world, like Aang would have been proud of them. Even for like the little things, he would have been.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure it just seemed like his responsibility like overshadowed his like true feelings for his kids.
Right. Aang, like we saw him as a kid, but at the same time, like from everything that we see, like based on his nature and based on his outlook in life, I don't believe that Aang would have, actually loved any of his kids less just because they weren't airbenders. I think that I genuinely think that he loved all of his kids equally, or that he was one of those parents that's like, I love my kids, they're all amazing, you should see them. But I don't know, maybe it's just, the adults letting doubts creep in at some point in their lives, or I don't know. Maybe it's just those things that's never said. But I don't think Aang would have been a deadbeat dad. I think that it's just he didn't do a good enough job of conveying certain thoughts and feelings, or maybe just those thoughts or feelings didn't take as well with his kids as he would have liked. But it's just sad to think that like these two accomplished adults think that their dad didn't like them as much because of something that they couldn't help.
Well, I mean, look at Tenzin too. Look at how Tenzin kind of acts with his kids.
That's true
It's
too.
it's kind of the same way. Like he has that like big fear of responsibility. I mean, I wouldn't call it a fear of responsibility, but this big fear of failure because of his responsibilities. That his kids sometimes seem like they might feel neglected or whatever, but he clearly loves them and he wants the best for them, and he's trying, and now he's added on another kid that he has to basically parent. He has to
Yeah.
teach Korra and teach her like certain morals and like a certain way of life and everything to be able to do this. And that's a huge responsibility, and he takes his job like super serious, but he loves his kids, but he has a hard time kind of showing it sometimes, especially with his one daughter and her like spiritual connection and everything. Like I think he was pretty doubtful for a while. I think like if I remember right, like there was something going on with him and his daughter who like was very susceptible to like the spirit realm and everything, who could
Yep.
do like the projection and stuff. Like I think there was something going on with them, if I remember right, where he like didn't believe her or something like that, or he was trying to push her too hard and everything, and she was trying to like uh show that she could do it and make her dad proud and everything. Um, but
I
like at,
think
at the
that
cost of
it's
like her own like stability and all that. But
I think it came across more like she didn't really have like, or like she had this ability, but she didn't share it with her dad. And Tenzin thought he was like an expert, but it turned out his daughter what like it. There's a matter of talent to consider as well. And his daughter saw spirits like all the freaking time. Like turns her head, sees a spirit, and is like, whatever. Meanwhile, Tenzin is like, oh, I haven't actually seen one, but I'm sure that when it's time, I'll be able to, or just
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, it was something like that I was remembering, and I think yeah, maybe that's what it was, where she was more more scared to like reveal that to her dad because she didn't want him like mad at her type of thing. Like I don't know, the,
Kid,
the the dynamic that he had with his children, I could see that being somewhat a reflection of like how Aang treated his kids. Even though he never meant to, it was probably like they feared disappointing him the same way like Tenzin's kids feared disappointing him. And maybe that's what
yeah,
kind of like made them feel like insecure and everything, and feel like, well, maybe I wasn't good enough because I wasn't exactly what dad wanted.
that's possible. I mean, there's moments where I can definitely see that that might be part of the dynamic that we're looking at, because their dad is also this this important figure who like he runs the Air Temple Island, and he's a member of the Republic City Council or whatever, and he's this big important figure, and so they're I don't know, maybe like his older daughters would feel awkward bringing up stuff with him about that kind of thing, where it's like, hey, I might actually be more of an authority on spiritual stuff than dad, so maybe I should say something, but dad's really excited about this. I don't know if I should speak up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Um.
I mean, it's a being a child and not being sure how to approach something with an adult when you spend your whole life learning to listen to adults.